So, welcome to Hackstock, welcome to the Trampery, welcome to Science Fiction London, or Sci Fi London, as it's also known, hashtag SFL16. No, it's not long at all. Anyway, so this is Talkaoke, welcome to the show. Everyone's welcome to come and sit around the table and talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's kind of up to you. Obviously, we're here in a immersive arts environment, so there might be that kind of flavour to the show, but not necessarily. My name is Mikey. Let's find out who we've got around the table. Come and take a seat on the table of chat. Come and take a seat, come and sit down. Let's find out who you are, what you've got to say. So, as I said, my name's Mikey. What's your name?
Hi, right. My name is Raf.
Raf.
Yeah.
Okay, and?
Margot.
I'm Tasman.
Rick. And as I said, I'm Mikey. Now, as I said before, hello, come and take a seat. We're just starting up, just warming and winding this up. I was just introducing everybody and myself. You can sit wherever you want to sit. Cool. What we're trying to say, I think, here with Talkaoke is there's a new expression of freedom, and it's up to really the participants to take it in the direction they want to take it. My role in the middle is simply just try and navigate that crazy ship to a place where everyone, that everyone wants to go to. Anyway, so we have got Raf, we've got Margot, we've got Tasman, and Rick, and what's the name?
Becca.
And
Jack.
And has anyone got anything they want to get the ball rolling with? Anything they want to start off with? Any thoughts, comments, observations, suggestions, ideas?
On any topic, or are we restricted by a topic, or are we just talking about anything?
Whatever you want to talk about.
I guess what got me here is that scene from Minority Report where there's the cyber cafe, and it imagines a future where you can plug yourself into experiences that feel real, like murdering your boss or flying, and I'm interested in whether we will ever get there. And
well, I think flying we do already.
Yeah?
But I don't know about murdering your boss. You can do that, but there's a severe penalty.
On Minority Report, wouldn't that be a dangerous thing to sort of imagine killing a boss, because then they would go, he's going to commit a crime, and then arrest him.
Yeah. Can I say you look a little bit like one of the sort of like psychic people that lives in the jacuzzi? It's a bit like one of them. Obviously not.
They don't have a beard, do they?
there was no hair. There was no hair on them. They were
from here upwards. Anyway, okay, so we're talking about Minority Report, and it's interesting, what is science fiction actually doing when it's envisaging the future? What is it describing? There's so many questions there. One scene actually in the film, not even the whole film. Have you seen Minority Report?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Can someone explain?
No, the thing that for me is really interesting. Honestly, frankly speaking, I have no background to talk about sci-fi, but I'm totally involved inside virtual reality productions. Yeah. So the thing that is extremely interesting, that what is real becomes unreal, but you can touch what is unreal in Minority Report. Does it make sense what I said?
Yeah.
So it is very interesting when you try to explore this kind of untouchable graphical user interface that give you the opportunity to interact with reality. Yeah. So how the things that are real become unreal, but after you can interact with something that is unreal, it could be just a good start to have a conversation. No? Too much? Doesn't make sense what I said?
So you're saying that reality, something that say from certain
Sensory, becomes virtual. But after you interact with something that is virtual, so the virtual becomes real.
It's like a kind of switch, like the real, boring, dull world itself becomes like a simulacra.
But more than simulacra, it's the thing that for me to be always interesting, these kind of interactions with the virtual reality, is that you try to let become something that is real abstract. Does that make sense? Okay? And after you start to interact with the abstraction, and then you produce all the contents of the drama and the movie and stuff like that. Does it make sense? Or
does it make sense? You're the psychic.
I'm obviously doing a bad job this morning. Kind of, I think.
So, okay, so let's just try and get our heads, right, we're here, let's try and get our heads around this. So you're talking about like abstracting the real itself becomes abstract.
Yeah, but after you start to interact with the abstraction,
Yeah.
and it becomes real again. Yeah.
I think I got it right away, but then the more you kind of describe it, the more confused I become. But I think essentially, in essence, I think I know what you're talking about. Talked about something for ages, even though the meaning of it was like pretty simple. Yeah, I do it all the time. But in terms of virtual reality, we just for the first time tried with Tasmin the goggles, and it is quite crazy how it takes you a little bit of time to kind of get used to it, and then before long, like your body kind of starts reacting to what is there. So in a way, you're having quite a real reaction to something that is not real, which I found quite amazing.
This is why after you start to interact with stuff that technically is named gestural interfaces.
Named what?
Gestural interfaces.
Gestural interfaces,
yeah. This is what happened.
So that's when you kind of start moving your limbs and kind of jump and...
Yeah.
So that what is real become virtual, but after you start to really interact with something of virtual, and it becomes reality again. So sorry, it's not an abstraction. It's just the real.
It's a different kind of reality.
It's a real state of technology too. You think about it. Anyway, when you play with the kinetics or stuff like that, video game.
So I've got a question. What is the what would be the purpose of blurring lines between real reality and unreal reality?
I'm going to turn the question around to you. What is the purpose of reality?
What is the purpose of reality?
You're assuming the current reality has a purpose, and that we'd have to find that in our new virtual reality.
Does it have to have a purpose? Is probably
Yes.
way of putting
Does it have to have a purpose to have utility?
I don't think that reality in itself has a purpose. It's just something that exists. That is just you cannot not have
How's
reality. But then, as everything that's this counter reality.
Yeah.
So can I talk or for me? No, if you think that basically this is just a philosophical approach that usually there is into the science. If you think, for example, just basically I'm an architect, okay, to describe the structure of a building, okay, the first approach that there has been more than 1,000 of years ago, they made a virtual abstraction of the concept of the forces, representing the forces with the hands of the people that are there to get a balance of the building. And after, from that philosophical considerations, they start to make all the mathematical approach to describe how to really build the building. It's the same thing that happens with the virtual reality of the gestural interface. You make an abstraction with reality, you let it intangible, not touchable, and after you start to interact with the virtual to make something that into reality is real. It's just from this philosophical approach you start to have something of real and to produce contents.
But, okay, I think I'm kind of getting what you're saying. But is there really a difference? Because if reality is all subjective and it's literally what you're picking up from your senses anyway, then the minute that virtual reality can do touch and all the other senses...
What you're saying, reality is almost like made with your own senses anyway.
Well,
it's made in your mind.
There's no objective reality anyway. So virtual reality, as soon as you get to touch things in virtual reality and you can actually feel them, it's just going to be exactly the same as reality, except we can construct it.
Only if it's in a collective, though, because I think if you're an individual in an experience, that you can determine your own kind of space.
We're actually collectively determining a reality as well.
I think that's necessary because if you're, that whole idea of whether the sound of the tree in the forest, whether you can hear that, you have to have multiple people to determine what things are, and I think that's kind of where we are with science and religion and things like that.
Okay, so the collective understanding of reality is very important. That's maybe kind of missing from the virtual reality experience, that we're all like in our own world, in our own headsets, and we're not linking those things up together. I mean, going back to Minority Report, was that an individual experience, those kind of like things that you plugged into, or was it like a group experience?
In the film, it was an individual experience, and that's kind of the model of how commercial kind of experiences would be.
Yeah.
But
Do you think that's a kind of Hollywood projection of what virtual reality should be?
I think it's as far as they could imagine at that point. But I think what will make it, I think that's one step is where you have complete feedback, so the concept of reality becomes meaningless and that curtain disappears. But what also is possible is you could have dreamlike experiences that are shared amongst people, so that people have identical experiences or feed into them.
Collective dream.
Yeah, collective dream. That we're supposedly sharing now. That would make things very interesting because you could have.
Come and take a seat. Come and get involved. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
What's that? Look, this is Talkaoke. There's no time limit. You could stay 30 seconds. You could stay all day. It's up to you.
Okay.
It's up to you. It's no one's keeping you here. There's only anything keeping you here is your own projection of the social pressure. We're talking about the collective reality, and is that what is missing from virtual reality? That even in the kind of science fiction visions of it, it's always quite individualistic. But Becca sort of mentioned that actually our reality might be something which is fluid and actually in our heads, but it's a collective reality that we're all adding to, contributing to, whereas the virtual reality is quite an individual experience. That's what we're talking about.
In a collective, sort of online collective environment. So although there's not someone in the same room as you, but they're in the same room as you in the virtual world. So it's like an online community.
Does that actually happen?
I don't know. I don't know if it happens in VR. Obviously, it happens in online games and stuff like that. Yeah, and Second Life and stuff. But I imagine it would happen in virtual reality as well. Wouldn't it?
Aren't they working on that? So like a virtual reality Skype thing where you can like be in the same room with people across the world.
Yeah.
I think it'd be amazing.
Can say no. The thing that is really interesting that when you interact with something virtual, what I said before, is the interpretation that you have of your surrounding. Okay, if you think about the drama, for example, described inside Minority Report, the thing that was extremely strong is that to the participants to this reality, they had not the chance to have an interpretation of reality.
So they had no chance to actually affect reality.
Absolutely. It was a virtual reality just to classify the people, impose a point of view to the people.
An imposed virtual reality.
Imposed virtual reality. And this is one of the questions that I discussed the last week, because usually in London there are a lot of meetings about this kind of concept of virtual reality, is how complex can be the virtual reality to really simulate the reality. All the parameters that you need, all the human interaction that you need, all the abstractions and the concept that you need to put in a video game environment, because fundamentally this is what we are talking about. Something of interactive, and how complex is it from philosophical point of view and from the real point of view to make it properly, to make it works properly.
Okay. Is that a technical question or is it a kind of philosophical question?
It's half and half.
Half and half. Becca, you wanted to say something that come to you, Margot?
I was just going to say, with the MMO's point of view, with gaming, is that there is a rule system, and that I think the whole kind of the question about virtual reality is that are there rules or not?
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that is either defining the Minority Report example and that, which is why the collective point of view is an interesting one, because like even in Inception, there's somebody building that world.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a set of rules to it, which is kind of the opposite of what virtual reality is kind of for.
Yeah.
People want to have as much room for experiment as possible.
So rules of the game, so to speak, rules of the reality.
It's set by the parameters of the programming.
I think that's what Becca's saying. But someone's designing it. Can that be actually authored by the participants, or is it something that's imposed? And certainly in the Hollywood mode, it's always authored by an individual and it's imposed upon the person that experiences it. What were you going to say, Margaret?
I was just going to say, for ages, when you were talking about, what's the purpose of virtual reality and kind of a question of philosophical aspect of it, and also this thing of when people kind of were simulating reality to build a house. That's fair enough. They're going to build a house, somebody's going to be living there, so there's a purpose to it. Whereas, kind of going back to what you were saying in Minority Report, like imagine the reality, live in a virtual reality where you can kill your boss. I think the kind of the priorities are just slightly different. And my fear is that in virtual reality, if there are no rules, like, what are the rules? Then, are we actually going to achieve anything, kind of thing? If we're just going to be like,
do you think we need the rules? I mean, it comes to a
What if
point
people
that-
start doing like stupid things all the time in the
Yeah.
virtual reality, and that becomes our reality? Then it's just the life is going to be like slightly impoverished.
I mean, it comes down to something we were talking about earlier on. Is like, can you actually have crime in virtual reality if you are like killing your boss, or you know, or acting out some kind of extreme violence in a very real way? Is that actually criminal? Should there be rules to it? I'll come to you in a second. Mate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was I can't remember the play, I think it was called The Nether, that was on in the UK, and that
this
dealt
was
with
mentioned,
that
yeah.
very thing that, you know, molesting a child in a virtual space. The debate is that an outlet for desires that might address it and prevent it being caused in the real world, or is it a feeding mechanism that legitimizes that behavior? But the point about where it's going, I think, is hugely dictated by these giant tech companies, which are so far motivated to individualize us and keep us separate to sell us a product each.
Yeah.
Rather, there's no motivation there to create virtual reality that may be used to, you know, create a collective conscious, which may have huge kind of mental illness and healing properties. Because if you can, and this is getting kind of crazy, so if you can share
We were talking about this
if you can
yesterday.
share empathy and feedback within a large group, you know, particularly for an experience you had, you're going beyond the level of sharing an experience in a group therapy session forever. You could actually pass on the sensation of growth and improvement and empathy, and a large group can, you know, hive mind that. I think there's a huge amount of possibilities there.
Hang on, no.
She's a lady. She's a lady before. No, she's
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to use this. No, but what you said about, I think if it's a real reality, then we all have equal access to it, because we have all the tools as human beings to kind of to live it, to alter it, whatever. Or
So in a way, there's a kind of.
But if
there's
it's a
rule-
company
Yeah.
dictating you, okay.
Yeah.
We don't have the tools. Like
Yeah.
you as an individual, you're not born with tools to create your virtual reality. Maybe that will change in the future, but somebody will have to give you those tools. And unfortunately, probably it will be like a big company, and then your virtual reality.
I mean, I guess it becomes a political question of who gets to make the rules of the reality.
Probably you've used the right word. It's more, it's a political question. Why? Because if you think, for example, about this kind of movies about sci-fi or virtual reality that represent this virtual world, okay? In each case, there is never a local identity. Everything is flat. The point of view is imposed to all the participants to the game. And this is why when you try to make something that is global, for sure, you must deliver very basic concept. Just to give you an example, okay, if you think to the movie Nemo,
Yeah.
okay, right? Fantastic movie, okay?
Yeah.
What have they talked about? Love, family. These are all common concepts all over the world. Does make sense? But they have not described an Italian family or a Japanese family, or because you can't. When you start to interact, and especially when you want to sell your product, you must talk about generic and basic concept just to prioritize your drama and your narrative choices. In that case, you start to sell your product worldwide. Does it make sense what I said or not?
Okay, so if you want to sell your product worldwide, you can't really talk about the local or the specific. I mean, do people agree with that? You haven't said much. What's your name anyway?
Irmina.
Irmina?
Yes.
Have you got a view on this? If you don't, that's fine. That's just listening.
Well, I'm just listening because actually I am practicing yoga and like, you know, meditating.
Yeah.
So I have I create my totally different world in my brain.
Is that an individual world, or are you tapping into something collective? Because that's really the question. And it's more in terms of a technological virtual reality. But what people are saying on the table is that what's missing from that is it should be a collective reality, that everyone has got an input onto how those rules work and how that actually comes.
Maybe.
So with meditation, is it an individual thing or a collective thing?
I think it's a collective as well, because we are connecting somehow. Our brains are connecting, so we are feeling each other.
Yeah.
So this is like kind of virtual world, but it's invisible, you know.
Right.
I was going back to that thing about the crime, or virtual crime thing. If it is a collective experience, then there is obviously the option of someone invading other people's privacy, breaking the rules, or invading someone's personal space or something, you know, and harassing them.
Knocking down their Minecraft building.
Oh yeah, something. I'm just who knows where it will go? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, what happens then? It happens in that environment. So then, do you need rules for that? And yeah, what happens in that kind of
is
environment?
property protected in a virtual space?
But yeah, if you spend your time building, I don't know, a house and someone comes along and just smashes it, what happens?
Tasman.
I think as long as you have a collective VR, you have to have rules. Otherwise, there's going to be a victim always, like what you were saying about. I don't know if anyone knows about Rust, the game Rust. Anyway, people just literally just kill people as soon as they even start playing the game. Like, so you can't even enter the world without getting killed. As long as it's collective, there has to be rules. If it's individual, then not so much. Like you were saying about killing your boss. If that's obviously like not
Your
a
own
real
fantasy,
person, if it's not a real person, it's constructed by pixels, and it's not like someone experiencing being killed over and over again, that's fine. But the minute your boss has to be part of that, that's then an issue.
Well, yesterday we heard about this game that's that is like a first-person shooter game that actually you're connected to your blood, and every time you get shot, it takes blood from, like real blood from you, which gets donated to the blood bank.
So eventually you just get anemia, or I mean, it's a slightly different sensation from getting shot. It's just you feel a bit lightheaded.
Yeah, there must be a point, I suppose, where you're not allowed to play the game anymore because you've been
or you can't hold the controller anymore.
Well,
I was just talking about when you were talking about gaming and the idea of crime. It just feels to me like there's like two planes of thought going on here. Is just that escapism, and then like an empathetic kind of human endeavour. And I guess I'm just curious to know which one.
Can they be woven together? This extreme fantasy and escapism with an empathy. Are they just like two completely different currents going in different directions, or can they ever be woven together?
You could have an entire company kill their boss in the same virtual space and share the united sensation of relief. I think there's a huge amount. I think just like with video games, there's plenty of scope to have pure entertainment experiences, pornography, and helpful, constructive group activities, and the same would be so in the virtual space. There may be overlap, but I think there's no.
Hang on.
But this is all happening in real reality anyway. Why do it? So why do we need to create yet another way of escapism?
Like
because, for instance, what you were saying, Irmina, about meditating and kind of connecting to collective experience with other people who meditate. I mean, that's partly what religion is doing anyway. So it's like it's here. Like we don't have to. No. I'm just saying. Like creating virtual reality is just like, okay, we can do it because we're humans and we're really clever. Oh, look at us, aren't we great? Now we can connect our blood to the game and whatever. That's cool, but let's not get too engaged in where that can lead us, because there's like why
what if it can cure people of mental illness?
Can you say a little bit more about that idea?
I listened to a podcast where they were talking about a game that was designed by a woman who had suicidal thoughts after having a long-lasting concussion. And she got a huge amount of feedback about how helpful that was. So I'm just imagining that there'd be a lot of,
how did that actually work?
It was just, I don't fully understand, but it was just a very basic video game based on her experiences and the tools that she used, which became power-ups on dealing with these suicidal thoughts and depression and that kind of thing. So, we know with group therapy and psychiatrics that there's scope there with just one-to-one. So if you can, Vulcan mind meld, you can potentially have huge, more deep, more meaningful improvements for people, especially if you have a group. You could have a group of 100,000 people, hive mind idea, that you could then download their various experiences, and that might feed into.
Hang on.
Probably in this case, I got a conversation with a psychologist just not so much time ago anyway. It's very interesting thing, but more than about the tool, is because you have a filter with the reality. What I want to mean, for example, when you wear the sunglasses, okay, and you are a timid person, okay, you have a conversation with someone, the sunglasses for you are a filter, give you a sense of protection. In this case, it's a very interesting thing, because this kind of person that have problems to be related with the reality. In this case, virtual reality is a filter with reality, and you can start to have your real interaction with other people that are not near you. This is a thing that you are not able to do face to face. Basically, all this consideration. Probably I'm saying something that is a very basic concept, but they are at the base of all the products that they are developed not only for virtual reality but for social media communication too. At the base of everything, there are the people. At the base of Facebook, there are the people. At the base of Twitter, there are the people. So after all these people from the virtual place that is Facebook, they start to make what? Real world, having meetings and stuff like that. So if you think about this, each kind of virtual reality is just a way to communicate. And if it is too much abstracted, okay, after you go to look for something to let it be real. For example, Second Life.
Yeah.
Okay. When you go in Second Life, your first approach, what is it's your generic avatar. But after I've done this, after 1 month or 3 weeks, you start to look for the community that is more near to your approach to the life. So if you are involved in fetish environments, you start to look for this kind of things. If you are a scientist, you go to look for people that make scientific research. So at the end, you can be virtual and as you want. But at the base, there are the human interactions with their feelings.
It's always like something that's on top of real human experience. Okay. Tasmin?
I was just going to say what you're saying about mental health is like incredibly important because one of the biggest issues with mental health is attendance. You can't get people with mental health issues to come to something regularly. If they've got depression, they don't want to leave the house. And also the money that it costs to diagnose someone with mental health, it takes about 3 years to get a steady diagnosis because they don't want to spend out on treatment. There's a thing called DBT, which is behavioural therapy, where basically you watch how people interact and you try and learn how to interpret things in a normal way. And if there was a virtual reality way of doing that, that would eliminate so many issues with mental health. There's such a great application there.
Okay, so I mean, actually, the possibilities of mental health were talked about a lot, has been talked about all weekend, really. And it is, you know, to me, it's kind of a surprising thing, but, you know, when you see the kind of technology that's out there, you can see why.
I just wanted to add, but everything that you said, I agree with this. Like, if there's something in virtual reality that it's a tool to make people's experience of real reality better, then I'm all for it. What I was concerned about is, like, there's so much focus on creating virtual reality that I was kind of worrying that may eventually replace the real reality.
Yeah.
But that would not be my desire at all.
I mean, Ralph is saying that it's actually the opposite. You always have a real reality at the base of it. You haven't said much yet so far. Have you got a view on this? You're still picking up the pieces?
Yeah, still picking up the pieces and waking up.
Okay, all right. Good morning.
I think, though, I mean, you know, people become addicted to video games, so that is something that can happen, that people might become addicted to the virtual reality space. But also, I know they're using virtual reality in hospitals to give people kind of a relief and a kind of a distraction from their illnesses, which is helpful. The one thing that I am kind of like grappling with in my mind is that if you're in a virtual reality and you're using that as a way to kind of escape your current reality, doesn't that mean that if you are becoming addicted, then your current reality is being neglected, and then that is just going to continue?
Yeah, a balance, yeah.
I guess a lot of what we're talking about is deals with what's called the natural fallacy, the kind of idea that homegrown organic food was always, you know, the paleo diet, everything is, you know, we've mastered being humans right now, and I think the opposing viewpoint that comes from a lot of kind of futurists and tech addicts is that this tech can come in and solve some of the problems, you know, the imperfection of, and I was thinking even beyond mental health, there's applications for VR potentially for physical ailments where the placebo effect worked previously. Mental states could be used to aid in healing.
I mean, we saw actually, I mean, this was all yesterday, but you can see it on the podcast if you just go to our website. We saw a lot of technology which is out there for things like people with eating disorders that actually use virtual reality to make the food bigger or smaller, and it's a very simple thing. Also, ways of actually giving people a feeling of their actual body chemistry as it's happening. These are all to do with eating and nutrition, and that. But so many different health issues. What's that?
I can imagine it being going for things like phantom limb as well and stuff like that. Yeah, so that would be a good treatment.
With that, I mean, I know that there's been a lot of criticism about video games, saying that it's kind of it's creating this real, especially in America, a lot of violence and these kind of gun crimes and things. How can we differentiate between people saying no, video games aren't affecting teenagers and they're not making them more violent, and yet virtual reality is allowing people to change their behaviours? Like that, surely that's kind of contradicting each argument.
But I think you can adopt an evidence-based approach to this, because that's a massively incorrect argument. Like, computer games correlate with...
Well, you're saying there's no evidence for this?
No, I'm saying there's evidence against it, that computer games correlate with reduced violence, and it's absolutely incontrovertible. But it's ignored, because it doesn't suit the sort of the rhetoric of those who, you know, who somehow profit from computer games being demonised. Susan Greenfield always rings a bell with me.
Sorry, say again?
Susan Greenfield, former head of the Royal Institution, a surprisingly unscientific head of a scientific body who who always writes articles in the right-wing press about how computer games are turning kids into violent thugs, but she never cites any evidence because there is none.
So they're not getting turned into violent thugs, they're getting turned into passive vegetables instead.
So the difference is that in games, it's not affecting people's behaviour, but in virtual reality it is.
Yeah.
Why is that? That was kind of my...
Is there evidence for
But
that?
you've just given all these examples of how it has.
We know how it might. We're nowhere near there.
Yeah.
I see. I guess that what we're touching on also is the Orwellian, you know, is what we do in our minds ever accessible to law enforcement or to moral judgments, or is it like what the internet was supposed to be, a completely amoral space?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's the whole... You haven't seen Minority Report, but most people around the table have. That is effectively... one of the sort of concepts that's dealt with there is like, is the space of the mind, should that be without judgment, without...
Yeah, I also wonder with violent games and stuff in a virtual reality world, especially if they're like taking blood from you and stuff like that. That surely it's going to be even more like you're not going to want to commit crimes because you know what the consequences could be if you get shot back or something like that. It might hurt or something. You know, it might make the experience.
Isn't giving blood actually like a positive thing that's kind of like gives you a warm feeling?
Possibly, I don't know. Maybe some people.
Yeah. I mean,
I just wonder if it heightens the experience. You actually feel like what it is like to.
Yeah, the blood is donated. Oh, they donate the blood? The blood is actually donated. So.
Yeah, but if you feel.
I don't know if you get shot in the head, they stick a needle in your head. I don't know if it works like that.
But like if you get like this experience of like the actual feel the experience of being shot in the head, you're gonna actually go, oh yeah, this is great. Let's go out there.
Yeah, so it could put you off from being shot in the head or exposing yourself to that.
No, but probably at the base of all of our considerations, there are just a couple of concepts, are the meanings that we give to the things and the interpretation that we give to the things. For example, just to give you an example, if you go to two different writers, okay, just 2 sheets of papers, 2 pens, and tell them, write a romance about love. They have the same tools, 2 sheets of papers, 2 pens, but for sure you will have 2 different romances about loves. Doesn't make sense. So this is the interpretation and the background that they have. In this case, for example, when you say, okay, you can just plug something to pay with the blood, what we are doing, okay, it makes sense because it's attached to the interpretation that we have of the reality, and it has a price, and it is meaningful in the real world. So what I usually I'm able to understand for these kind of things about gaming, interaction with the gamings, interaction with the virtual things inside the movies, is that in all the cases, they are only true and meaningful if they are attached to something that is real. Otherwise, all the drama, they don't make sense.
Yeah, it needs a kind of traction, it needs a grounding, a leverage in something that's real, something that we can understand, something that we've experienced.
We live in a tangible world.
Yeah, okay.
I think then if there's a linear route between reality and virtual reality, there tends to be like an expectation of the way that you need to live your life, because if you're being exposed to all these fantasies that have some kind of correlation between your own life.
So that virtual reality could actually become the experience that you're touching on that allows you to go further in the fantasy.
And I know that there's this argument about romantic comedies, and that because people watch
rom-coms.
them, they have this expectation of what romance is really like, and it's not like that. And so if there are people in the world that cannot find somebody because their expectation is too high. And so just having that Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very like small example, but in
Okay,
virtual reality, that could be quite.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I'll come to you in a second. Yeah.
But that's something that's been kind of imposed over time. It hasn't always been like this. I think this kind of concept of romantic love and kind of finding the person that you fall in love with, that's something like fairly recent. I think previously love was very different, I suppose. So
Well, how is it different?
I think people saw it differently in terms of it was just like love wasn't a thing. It wasn't until a kind of romanticism that people started kind of paying attention to what rom-coms are now making the money on, this kind of concept. So it's like you set a fad, and then if it catches on, then
What Becca's saying in a way is it's raised the bar of what a relationship, what a loving relationship could be, maybe to impossibly high levels, but it still raised it from just, oh, you're just going to marry the next farmer's son or daughter that lives in the farm next door.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that is my question. What is
Yeah.
But
That was based on a patriarchal society in which women were sold off into marriage. Now that's not a thing. Then you have the ability to kind of fall in love.
Do you think it's kind of, the other side of the rom-coms making it impossibly high standard, but they've also raised the bar of what people think can happen in a relationship in a way, in kind of...
I'm just suddenly thinking, it's kind of going back to Minority Report in a way,
Yeah.
but what if you start using it like predicting the future, like saying, oh, I'm thinking of spending the rest of my life with this person or something, and then you have the experience in the virtual reality and you go, oh, no, this is terrible.
In 20 years' time, you're in this kind of like, sort of very kind of like, I don't know what the nightmare scenario would be, but you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Yeah.
What if you start doing
A simulation of what your relationship would be like in 10, 20, 30 years' time.
But I think if you take the consequences away from like people's mistakes, so if you let people make mistakes virtually, there's no consequences, there's no real life they're never going to learn, surely. Like if you don't have to actually, yeah.
So if you kind of eradicate all the kind of possible mistakes or mismatches, then like what's left kind of thing. I think all the fuck-ups are the spice of life. But actually, speaking of technology and relationships, I was reading recently that apparently there's something that people are working on, which is they can check whether how many eye contacts your partner had throughout the day. You can kind of keep tabs on this.
What, with other people? Or
with other people, not with yourself, because you.
Yeah.
Unless you cannot see, then you will know when the eye contact was made. But like in the course of the day, how many kind of eye contacts?
What does that tell you?
I don't know. I guess it's up for interpretation. But it's interesting how technology kind of slowly is looking to encroach onto this kind of just making sure that person is like definitely with you. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I found out fascinatingly worrying.
What do people think of like this relationship augmenting technology, as we're calling it? I'm going to.
Just as long as it's opt-in, I don't see a problem, I guess. But I mean, that sounds like it would be quite invasive. So I'm kind of dubious it's a thing that you can just do. There must be some technology that's looking at people's eyes to know that eye contact is being made and so on. So that can't just be like an app that guesses. I mean, no, I'm just kind of curious to know more about it.
Okay. Well, we can.
Why would somebody? So I think my question is like, why would somebody would like to download that app? And isn't that kind of tying it with what you were saying, Bex? That there is a way in which people, perceive relationship or whatever. And in order for me to make sure that I'm in the right one, I need to know all these things. Do you know what I mean?
It's like real intense Facebook stalking, but another level.
Yeah. Okay, so at the moment we're talking about, can technology actually, or virtual reality technology actually help improve our relationships, our love matches especially, but maybe relationships as a whole?
I guess it can, conceivably, but I mean, what it seems like a lot of us are talking about recently is our lack of understanding between the relationship between and what we fantasize our reality should be and what we accept it actually is.
Yeah.
In love, in health, in mental health, in all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the great applications of VR may be enabling us to empathise with a large group of people.
Yeah. So, training us to have better relationships.
No, well, even beyond that, understanding better our relationship in our own mind between what we fantasize about and what the reality is, and whether they have a bearing or relationship and whether they coexist well or not. And I have great optimism about that.
Okay. I mean, someone yesterday said empathy starts with the self. You have to empathise with your own person and desires, etc., etc.
But what is this thing of like getting things right? I don't know, just like augmenting reality and doing things and kind of developing apps to, okay, if it's to aid, better health and improve people's conditions, then yes, but I think in terms of anything else, it's just slightly superfluous. Like, what, I mean, why do I need to...
Would you like to know, like, what life was like in 10 years' time with you, if you stayed with that partner, what it would be like down the line?
But that's part... I guess I'll find out if that lasts 10 years, but you can't know that. This is part of it. You can't know that.
I didn't mean just like relationships. I meant like anything kind of thing. You could like picking a job or or doing some activity or something. I don't know. I'm trying.
Intuition. Then you'd surely know what feels right, what's wrong. Like even with the jobs, if you're going to go and work in a bank, but your heart's not in it, then I predict you won't last very long. I don't need an app for this. Do you know what I mean?
Intuition app.
Intuition app.
Yeah, you agreeing?
Yeah, totally.
You've not said much so far. Got anything to add to this?
Well, I think the intuition, we are not like we're supposed to believe more in this. Because it's kind of our life,
Can you have intuition in virtual reality?
I don't know. I'm not so deep in this subject, so I can't say.
Yeah. Okay, but intuition is very important, and it's
one of the most important thing in our life, actually.
Okay.
Just getting back to Margot's point about a lot of the criticisms seem to mirror the criticisms of internet dating when that started, but that's now become so ubiquitous. I've been to 10 weddings in my life, 8 of those were people who met online.
Do you internet date?
No.
No.
I'm a cynic and a hypocrite, but no, actually, I just don't get it. I don't quite get the appeal. But I'm just saying, like, statistically speaking, it's kind of proven to work. Yeah, it's the norm. But also, they're genuinely successful marriages. One of the marriages who didn't meet on the internet are now divorced. All of the other 8 are happy and have been married 3, 4, 5+ years.
I think that's also to do with the intention, because if you're in a space where everyone's agreed that in what I want to get out of this is to get married, then you're more likely to find a match. Whereas in reality, you might be able to find somebody, but then they're like, well, I'm not really into a long-term situation. I think one thing that we're not kind of considering is that if you wanted to predict yourself changing over 10 years, the amount of variables within that are so extensive that the data within virtual reality probably wouldn't be able to compensate for predicting all those variables.
On day one of this, we were talking about the Brexit. I know this is a bit of the Brexit is a kind of should I stay in the relationship or not thing. The Brexit decision. Could you have a virtual reality app which would tell you what it was like if Britain stayed in the EU and if it left the EU? Actually, it would be a completely sort of fictitious idea, but it might give some sense of the effect. What is essentially an emotion? All decisions in a way are emotional.
I guess what Becky was saying is that's a far more. It's not black and white, but there's more data you can put to that. Whereas something that's emotional and human, it's less likely to be predictable. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm never saying never, but just it feels less like you can apply algorithms to that and get some semblance of a predictable future. Whereas the Brexit decision, there are some tangible numerical things that you can say actually that will happen.
It's probably easier to work out with virtual reality Brexit than it is whether you've got the right partner.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely, because you can't. So, the whole 10 years thing, if you look at your relationship in 10 years, you can look at objectively what you'd be doing if you'd have a house, if you'd have kids, but you can't look at how you'd feel emotionally. You're still going to feel about that person the way you feel in the present moment. You can't be 10 years down the line, I'm sick of him, I don't know, throwing his shaving everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the hard bit.
You could find out if they'd actually cleaned the bathroom in that previous 10 years.
A webcam will do that.
Yeah.
I'm much less interested in kind of how VR or big data or whatever can find me a love partner. I'm much more interested in. I mean,
Because you've already got one.
that's true.
Let's have a big round of applause.
Well, no, because in the sphere of love and sex, I share your view, which is that I have great trust in my own intuitions to make these judgments. But the question is what the utility of this is. Something that's in its infancy, where do we go with it? I think the empathy and mental health, that's a big area, but that again is of less need. I think, by the way, I think it'd be really good for autism, because you could download a bunch of human experiences that were new and original for someone who could just access them. But I'm mainly interested in it as a thrill-seeking extension video game. And the thing that we don't talk about with video games yet is we were talking about it before, about consequence, about the blood thing. And what was happening in Minority Report wasn't just positive experiences where you could go out and kill somebody, it was also having experiences happen to you. Yeah. And there was a neuroscientist who had a stroke, and she recounted her experience of having a stroke. Yeah. And how fascinating it was, because she understood the process as she was going through it. And she witnessed this period of euphoria because the stroke had caused her to lose a lot of the stress, the 50 years of stress before. So if we could experience, roller coaster style, experience these harms, we could experience being killed or being tortured or having a stroke. We could empathize on a whole new level. Plus also there's huge human value in going through struggle, even if it feels virtual afterwards, yeah.
But I just literally don't understand how I would be able to live my life if I suddenly could empathise with all the suffering in the world. I think I would just implode. So maybe the way...
explode.
I think implode.
Yeah.
Just because maybe that's just nature's way of preserving us from taking too much on. I mean, if 50 years of stress is quite big, imagine 50 years of stress of entire population that you can't...
This would be a matter of choice. You wouldn't be automatically downloaded the whole human suffering history over 100,000 years. It would be, you'd be opting in. Yeah, you'd be opting in. Yeah, if you had autism, you would join the forum where all these experiences... Well, I would never.
I mean that.
Women in the 60s. Yeah, I don't think so.
Would that be a little bit weird to download your mum's suffering? Would it be a little bit sort of?
Depends how confident you are in it.
Like your mum can. Do you know what I mean?
It's not a your mum joke. Sorry, I'm just saying. No, but. Can't get past the mum joke. No, but seriously, if somebody is like a close person to you, and you want, your agenda is to understand them and like help them, but you can't because whatever complicated relation you have with that person, then I would want to make the extra effort, and I'd like to download their thoughts to understand what they're going through, because maybe I'm just failing to see what the problem of the communication is. So I would actually want to do that.
But basically now we are discussing about the limits of virtual reality, because if we discuss about the limits, after a good writer, a good storyteller can write a new poem, a new script for a movie. This is what happened in this kind of, for example, Minority Report. At the end you start to download the sufferings or the problems that get your mother, in this case, that your mother had, or stuff like that, because we know that this is not possible in virtual reality. So this is a transposition. You go over these kind of boundaries, and it becomes the core of your story. At the base of everything, probably there is always, that we told before, the intuition. In each way, you try to translate the intuition in something that of real, that can be tangible, touchable. You download the file that is the sufferance of someone else. In Second Life, you continually raise your hand to interact with other people in your virtual environment. So in each case, we are just translating the real life in something that is
intuition.
Intuition, that to which one you can give an interpretation. That's all.
But wouldn't it be amazing if you could connect like people who are distanced from reality? So, politicians who like decide they're going to bomb a country, if before they did that they had to go through the suffering of the people who actually experience that and understand what that's like. Maybe if it was like that.
Download the politicians. Have I lost battery?
Yeah, if you could download what it's like to be yeah, to actually like be in that position of making the decision to go to war, what would that feel like? Would that actually mean that our politicians would have to be more honest?
They'd have to empathise with people. Like, yeah, I know. But they'd be like, imagine if that was like compulsory, that before they decide to take away benefits from people who need them, they have to experience that person's life and see what the hell it's like to do that. That would be incredible. What an amazing application to make people empathise.
Okay. I mean, do you need virtual reality for that? Because there was a thing on Facebook where they wanted Ian Duncan Smith to live for... Obviously now he's resigned because he's very, very upset about the way he's been asked to take people's benefits away and he can't deal with it anymore. But before then, they wanted Ian Duncan Smith to actually spend a week on benefit. And there's no virtual reality necessary, do you know what I mean? You just literally go and, you know, shop in Iceland for a week. Come and sit down, we're talking about the limits of virtual reality, what it can do in terms of empathy. This is Talkaoke, it's a free-form talk show. You can come and go and stay and contribute as little as or as much as you like. Obviously, if you start going over the top, I'll always pull the microphone away from you, but you get the idea. Anyway, that's what we're talking about.
I think what you're saying is absolutely right. You know, like with video games don't, you know, there's very few video games that recreate the mundanity of everyday life or situations that you can experience in real life. Well, not the meaningful ones for me anyway. The meaningful ones for me are creating experiences that exist beyond the physics we know. And so, yeah, absolutely, you know, I don't think there's any good utility argument about virtual reality replacing real-world empathy experience, which probably are the best. But if you think about kind of conversations that people have, you know, if you have two political opponents, what you'll see so often is a block where they're not listening to each other, and that, I think, is often a limit of language. So if they could Vulcan mind meld, you know, using virtual reality, they could speak in this intuition language that we barely understand, and they could probably more efficiently share ideas and find out where there are connections as well.
Okay, so would telepathy be a useful thing for politicians to have to achieve better decisions? Interesting, yeah.
I see a long-term benefit, but I think in the short term we'd be horrified at the reality of how little they empathise, how unhuman most politicians probably genuinely are. And I mean that in a genuine sense.
Why do you think that is?
Because have you seen the Tory party? I mean, there's lots of analysis of politicians and people in power, company CEOs, and the correspondence of them and genuine psychopathic behaviour is alarming. Have you ever read the book? Is it psychopath test or something like that?
John Monson,
and he's done a lot of work on analysing company CEOs, politicians, and basically they're all psychopaths. And I think I was intrigued by her idea of having the politicians have to take like a VR trek through the minds of people they're about to bomb, and actually I think they'd just be like, well, I don't care. They'll look at it not through their eyes, but see the consequence to themselves of the kids being bombed and just not really care. I think that some of them might actually laugh at it.
But I think though it's because we have a room full of white middle-class men over the age of 50 all nodding at each other going yes, yes, yes. And so if you had the ability to have a bit more of a wider variety of people from different backgrounds, then there would be more of a conflict. But just on that kind of, I think there is something in the White House about, like, if they were going to, there was some discussion about the red button in the White House, that if they had to go and
launch a nuclear attack,
then they had to shoot somebody in their office.
Really?
Yeah, it was a proposed strategy for pushing the button on nukes. There was going to be a White House staffer who had the key inside their body, so the president was going to have to murder that person in order to press the button. This was a hypothetical idea, yeah. But what about?
A good idea.
I got an idea about like nationalism, which seems to be kind of fading out a lot. What if we use kind of hive minds to reorganise the planet in terms of shared ideas rather than geographical areas? Then you could have large shared groups of people joined by empathy rather than by arbitrary birth.
Yeah. What would your country be?
Well, my fantasy, of course, would be that it would be one, all sci-fi predicts, these borders dissolve and we become a planet rather than,
So you think there should be a global nation anyway?
I am hugely optimistic that that would be a natural consequence. Upload enough hive minds and we would see that, this is a fallacy, this individualism, and we have so much overlap that the differences become negligible.
Yeah. You haven't said much so far. Well, let's just get your name.
Tom.
Tom, welcome. You don't have to say anything, but at the moment, I guess we talked about this the other day as well, this idea of where does a nation state come from? It's very arbitrary, it's accident of birth. What nationality you are, why not just be able to select your own nation, which is in a virtual space? We came up with the country Jaltia, based on our visualizer. Jaltia is not here today. I don't know if people would really want to live in Jaltia. Jaltia, so anyway, you'd have to meet the guy to know. There's a guy called Jalti. So, I mean, what would this be like? Would everyone be their own individual country? How would the countries coalesce? Would it allow people to pick their own political system?
So are you saying pick your own country out of whatever, Argentina, Spain, like the currently existing countries, or make up your own country?
Or it could be like in Harry Potter, where you put the hat on and they tell you which one.
Well, how do you see this?
Well, I would predict that those kind of geographical, if we find ourselves living more and more vicariously through a kind of cloud or hive mind, then the concept of where we live would become more and more meaningless, and that we would naturally organise into more kind of psychic groups.
So what would be your sort of psychic nation state?
What would
be the principles?
I'd be the leader, the developer, of course, running, pulling the strings. No. I don't know. I imagine the sci-fi future where an alien threat or a desire to move off-world or whatever forces us to become, over the history of humanity, we've become, from millions of tribes of 100, we've become bigger groups and bigger, and the waters come down eventually, and we're in a sense a global community already, although mainly kind of coalesced, used by Apple, but we may get there on our own terms, so I see it as quite a big kind of shared experience.
Okay, so it's not like a very small country, it's like a global state,
I think it would allow something interesting, which is toyed with a lot but can't practically happen yet, is that nations don't really tend to have a ubiquitous ideology behind them. They might superficially, like on a political level, but actually on an individual level they don't. But what it would allow people to do is people who have shared ideologies to form a virtual nation and could actually sort of battle it, not literally battle it out, but kind of just
like
about in virtual
ideas.
space, and see which one actually might be superior. And it might surprise us. It might be that actually anarcho-capitalism, if it was allowed to flourish, might be the one. I personally don't think it is, but it would be really fascinating. I like this idea. I
want to know what people's virtual states would be like.
A hippie, egalitarian, anarcho-conglomerate thing. I don't know.
Maybe that's everyone on the table. I don't know.
But maybe people are you saying that everybody should choose their own country, or can I kind of opt into your country that you run or something? Because I think some people they just don't want that choice. Maybe. Oh no, he's going.
Are you off? Give us a final thought. Or are you just going to Lou?
Just maybe French.
Okay. Yeah.
It down.
Come and join in. Have you been listening to this? Okay.
Cool. Simonetta, come here. Simonetta.
Simulator. Oh, Simonetta. I thought you were saying she was simulated. Simonetta. Simonetta, come. Are you a simulated partner or are you a real partner? What do you think of this? This discussion. Have you got a view on this? There's no compulsion here, so you don't have to join in for sure. But it'd be nice to get a view from the bubble chair. Anyway, Tom.
I think the idea of an elected country is an interesting one, but what is interesting is the implications for like the labour market.
Yeah.
And like how would it work in terms of if people just live their entire lives in VR, then what happens to work?
Yeah.
And I guess they're trying something interesting in Canada, in Ontario, with the idea of universal basic income, where everyone gets a certain amount of money a week, irrespective of whether or not they work.
Yeah.
And partly because technology is becoming more ubiquitous in the workplace and starting to manufacture more things. And I guess if you take that to its logical extreme, where people are just paid and have more free time to do what they want, and most of the labour is done by robots, then I think we're approaching a sort of situation like the sort of E&M Banks culture.
Yeah.
All the kind of work is done by machines, and people just have loads of free time and can just do what they want, which I think would be awesome.
What would you do in your free time?
I don't know. I enjoy my job, and I quite like having a job, and I quite like,
But you think you'd have a kind of virtual job, like a pseudo job?
I don't know. I'm a bit of a. Probably not the place to say this. I'm a bit of a technophobe. Like, I'm really slow to take up new technology and things like this. I tend to go like, oh no, because I'm just not very good with it. I don't know. I quite like human contact and stuff, so I would probably be the last one to jump on the thing. Yeah.
You come to. I think you'd be surprised.
I didn't mean that.
I think you'd be surprised, but there'll be a few people on the table that like human contact.
Sorry, I didn't mean that. Obviously, no one else did, but like. I'm just a bit like sort of hesitant and resistant to take things. So I don't know what I would do with my time. I would probably spend it doing, I don't know, whatever.
I think the one fundamental thing that is the problem with having a society like that is this idea of family, that everyone has to protect their gene pool, and so everyone becomes individuals. Like, people would be like, well, I want more money because I want my kid to have a better education, and etc. Whereas if we just make sure that, a child being raised by a village attitude, then we would probably be able to achieve that more, rather than concentrating on our little like 4-person family unit.
Do you think we're too concentrated on our own children? I don't have children, but people that have children just really focus on that one child, and they're quite competitive in a way that perhaps they're not competitive with themselves.
I think it's because it's biologically a necessity, and we're trained to do that. Like, you hear all the time, constantly, people will say, well, I'm doing it for my kids, or, I need to do it for my family, or it's just something that's innate in everybody, unless you really focus on not being like that. Even like with friends, you have like your friends, but at the same time, friends come and go. Like, it's not something that is so solid.
But isn't it kind of slightly geared towards like having to achieve something? It's like, so it's not the experience of having children that matters, and it's not kind of what happens on the way. It's just like, I want to make sure that my child is like top banana. Sorry, I couldn't think of any better phrase. It's like the top child, most educated, best dressed, most provided for. Just like the cleverest, the bestest child there is.
Is that what your mum wanted?
I don't know. We've not had that conversation, which is why I would be intrigued to download her thoughts. But then I'll just probably cry all my life. Anyway, but so this is the thing. It's just like people focus on like having like a really,
hang on
a really good child, like as if it was an accessory.
It's that kind of vicarious thing. It's like it's achievement for the second time around.
Yeah.
Final thought, Tom?
Don't have one.
Okay. Is that we shouldn't don't have a child? Yeah. Okay.
At the end, what is emerging from this conversation here is that, it's my point of view, probably in each case, there are the individualisms that are the real protagonists in virtual reality too. Because just to give you, for example, an example, what I think is that the virtual worlds are very good tools to better know the other people, but not to impose your point of view. Just to give you an example, thanks to Second Life, I have learned that when you in English say we are arguing about something, it means that we are very nervous discussing about something. Okay, in Italian. I'm Italian, okay? When you argue about something, it means that you are extremely relaxed and having a conversation.
Really?
It's completely the opposite.
Right.
So it has been, for me, just a way to learn something. But now, which is the better approach to this term, to the word discuss or argue, your or mine? That I'm Italian, it's just two different points of views, okay, about same thing. And anyway, in each case, we are talking about our individual approach to the things. But if you think this is probably one of the basic main concepts that is developed in all the movies, if you think, for example, to Final Fantasy or to Star Wars, at the end there is a tribe that is trying to impose its point of view on a virtual world, on all the worlds.
So it's always about some individual imposing their view.
So virtual reality is something to better communicate, but in each case, and this is my opinion, the best thing to do is to preserve our individual approach to the things. When you go in the other direction, you start to write marvelous movies, as Final Fantasy, as Star Wars, stuff like that, because you try to go over the boundaries of the real life. Could be.
Okay.
It's my consideration.
This is assuming we know where the boundaries of real life are now. You're talking about the boundaries of real life as if we understand where they are, or if they even exist.
Well, I mean, there are current technical constraints about what you can do, I suppose.
There are, yes.
I mean, where are we going with this conversation? I'm going to impose some physical constraints on this because I feel like it's all like going in some different directions.
I don't know. Sorry, I just had one thought about for me it always comes back to sensation and feedback and how we could replicate feedback and pain and sensation that would help us empathize in the real world, but even then potentially synthesize new sensations.
Yeah.
You know, the human body has a limited range of experience just in our bodies, but perhaps with technology and kind of procedural programming, there could be endless combinations of new sensations that would open us up to new ideas, new fantasies, new bodies.
Okay.
No. It's a very interesting point, but why? Because you are talking about virtual reality or virtual worlds to find or to discover new sensations. Okay, is this correct? Or invent them. Okay, cool. These are the same kind of approach. It's, from my point of view, it's just a good field to write something, but it's impossible to do. To give you an example, okay, when you buy the headphones. Okay, there are headphones.
Yeah.
Okay, how many kinds of headphones there are on the market? Thousands, more than thousands. But all these headphones, they are adapted to your ears. Why? Because you are a system that is not possible to change. It's the environment that must adapt to you. That's the sense what I said.
Okay. There's no headphones with 3 buds on them rather than 2, or like ones that are like up here or something like that.
You detach your ear, put the headphones inside the ear, and close the ear.
Yeah.
Because you are a system. Unadaptable.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's not true. We have biotechnology. I was just thinking about both of these kind of ideas that you're talking about. One is that, about enhancing or creating new senses or enhancing ones. Yesterday we saw a guy talking about this magnetic belt, that when you wear it for a few days, it sort of alters your perception of magnetism. And when you take the belt off after, 3 weeks or something, you can suddenly just see north. You just sense it, no matter where you are, you just sense north.
So you grow a sense of magnetic understanding, so you know this way is north, by the way, guys. Yeah. I don't know how I know that, but it is. So maybe I know that already. But so is the body so unadaptable? That's the question we're going to stack. I'm just going to jump out the middle of the table because it's all too much conjecture for this time in the morning, even after 2 coffees. But we're going to welcome Rowan in the middle of the table. We're going to keep this conversation going. There we go. So over to you, Rowan.
Cool. Well, while I get the headset on, does anyone want to raise or change the topic of conversation? So we're talking about human augmentation, human senses, but also the limits of, the limits of reality. Like where's the boundary between real and virtual space? You were talking about the idea of creating or enhancing senses. What would you have that you currently don't? Grab the mic.
I'd have everything that the natural world has that I don't have. I'd want to be able to see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. I'd want to be able to pick up on radio waves. What else? What else is there?
Should we get a final thought though, just before you disappear?
Thanks.
Cool. So you'd want to get something that the universe has to offer but doesn't currently present to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities that we're not aware of, but the animal world and the plant world, if we could photosynthesize, for example, we could create our own oxygen. There's all sorts of possibilities there.
Okay.
That would really help with space travel, wouldn't it? Because you would just be able to go into space just with your own, green skin. But this reminds me of a conversation that we had with kids. It's quite a common one. What superpower would you have? And I think last time I said I would have the superpower of just instant wit. I've been practicing. Do you know what I mean?
But you know, it is like, what superpower could you have, and that, what does that say about your you know, your personality and what you want from the world?
I suppose, yeah, might say something about your ego. I mean, so you'd have the ability to sense all the different electromagnetic spectrum and all that sort of stuff. You'd just have very quick wit. What about the rest? Should we? And actually, can I use this opportunity to get names as well? So, I know you're Mikey. What's your name?
I'm Jack.
Mikey, Jack.
Becca.
And what would your superpower or extra virtual sense be?
I mean, I've been quite obsessed with the Freakonomics podcast recently, talking about productivity, and I was thinking that it would be really great to be able to have the tools to mentally be able to focus yourself, so that you can say to yourself, right, this is the amount of time it takes to get good at something. I'm going to be able to commit to that without being distracted, and have like even if you had a plan, that doesn't need any special powers. It's just the ability to focus on it and could be consistent with it is the thing that I would really appreciate.
Okay, so the ability to focus better, if there's some kind of virtual way of augmenting that. And what's your name, and what would you?
Irmina.
Sorry?
My name is Irmina.
Filomena.
Irmina.
Irmina. Okay. And what would your enhanced sense or new sense be?
Well, I think the connecting different words and creating something like this, it's incredible idea, and well done. I think it's amazing idea, and I think so. I think it's like, well, I think I would like to be a member of. I would like to create some like a team of artists, and we can, you know, be connected with each other, and we can, you know, sharing our ideas there.
So literally, like psychic connection.
Yeah,
or something.
and as well.
Okay, thought brain-to-brain sort of communication. Okay.
Yeah, and because musicians have something like this, they are going for a gig, and they are creating their music together. And actually, when you are doing some plastic stuff, like by hands, it's hard to connect it, you know. So it can give us this possibility.
Okay, I like that one. It's a very creative one. And what's your name?
Oh, I'm Tasman. So I'm an actress, so I would pick that you can like be different people, which I guess is possible with VR, isn't it? That you can just like live in different worlds and like be queens and princesses and other things that are not princesses.
It's very
spaceships.
Disney, yeah.
No, you know what I mean? Like you can be a spaceman or a biologist, and like that would be like the epicest form of research in the world. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Okay, that's kind of touching on the thing about empathy we were talking about earlier in a way. Okay, but
I'm just really intrigued by Amina's idea about the sort of collective. I mean, just the reason why I gave you our card is because that's kind of one of the things that we try and do. Not necessarily saying that just we want to connect to artists, but connect up people's creativity in a very direct and spontaneous way, and work. I mean, we're not really. As the people speak, we don't really do VR. I mean, over here, there's actually a kind of like three-dimensional painting program going on, which is an individual experience, but I don't see any reason why it couldn't be like a collective sculpting experience. I think that's the...
Can I just say, it's not...
Oh, yeah.
It's not, it's...
Oh, come on, come on. This is one of the great...
Tell us what it is, yeah.
There we go.
Tell us what it is.
It's actually a full photorealistic reconstruction of a heritage building that is demolished. It's on the border of Palestine. It's there no more now, but we can visit it in that space. You basically walk around it and you can explore it. That's it. It's not a painting thing. That's by Google.
Oh, right,
that's not by us.
Okay.
So yesterday we saw people painting on the floor and things. But that's
we might
fascinating.
switch into the painting thing at some point. But no, the people that were on the floor were exploring the cave in the building.
Wow. Okay. Oh, this sounds amazing. So it's also a tool for architectural preservation and looking at preserving heritage sites. Especially, it sounds like one that's probably been damaged in recent conflicts in the Middle East. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting range of things that people would want and have. And
it's funny because earlier on we were talking about destroying things in virtual reality and there being no consequences, but in this case things are being destroyed in reality and then repaired in virtual reality. So it's sort of the opposite of perhaps what you really want ideally.
Yeah, I mean, in the virtual world, not only could you experience things that are not physically impossible. You could experience things that once were, and that there is a shared collective consciousness for, but you have or never will have the opportunity to experience. Cultural artifacts, or cliche historical events, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, another interesting, it's sort of almost analogous to the idea of census that we were talking about, is what historical periods you might choose to visit. Would people get locked in the past?
That's a great tool for like education though. Like imagine how much more interested kids would be in doing a history lesson if they actually got to walk around ancient Rome and go visit the Colosseum and do all that stuff. But obviously on a budget, because you just have to buy the VR thing.
So it'd be like a living museum, but cheaper.
I think that would be a really good idea, but I do think it would be incredibly politically nuanced. Like, like you just have to look at a Roman reenactment from the 1970s, and they've all got 70s haircuts, and they're talking, with the 70s vocabulary, and then look at one from now, like look at Gladiator or look at Ben-Hur, and the difference between that is much more actually reflective of the period and when it was made than the period that is seeking to represent. And I think that in a way you need a kind of almost like Wikipedia approach to creating that reality, to actually have some kind of apart from obviously recent times where you've got so much more evidence, I think it would be very, very much fought over what did the Russian Revolution actually look like,
But do you think there'd be a common consensus over time, though? It would approach something...
I think that's what you're saying, is that perhaps 50 years ago, you might have, the VR would be how America colonized Mars and how we won the space race, whereas now we're all a lot more educated about the facts and about the nuanced approaches to conflicts and achievements. Yeah, so there's hope there.
But I think as well, there's also, if we're talking about education, there's also always an argument as well about what should be, like if we say we had the budget for X amount of videos of experience, what would those be? Which is also another debate as well.
I just want to go to like Richard III, because that's a famous Shakespeare. You might know about it, being an actress. But, everyone now says, obviously, that Richard III has recently been dug up and he got a bad rap by Shakespeare because Shakespeare was writing it from the... But to me, I would find it really interesting to have some kind of malleable historical experience of, like, what that actually was like. Because I think it's so different, it's so rich in a way, exploring that character and what the character is in Shakespeare's view compared to the historical view of who Richard III was, compared to like some kind of imagination of almost like Game of Thrones or something like that. Like there was that whole thing, wasn't there, on TV recently about all the Tudor battles. I can't remember what it's called. What's that? Not Game of Thrones. That's another story. I hate Game of Thrones, I have to say. But there was what was it called? It was some. I can't remember the something.
There's a lot of them. There's like.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. I think to me, Wolf Hall was by far the best because it tried to use the lighting of the times and use the kind of really trying to be close, but. I imagine it's probably also nothing like it. People are far too attractive with good skin and good hygiene that they probably didn't have.
Is there any harm in having different levels of reality to this experience? So there'd be the Wikipedia example, and then there'd be somebody with flavouring it to make it more interesting. I mean, could you dial that in? Would you choose what level to play in or to observe, and then?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of scope for that. Maybe educationally, it's great to have an objective thing, but then to have Game of Thrones fans we know the scientific fact of what life was like then, but let's go and experience it as a kind of breast fest with ultraviolence, and let's have it as a roller coaster ride. But the other thing I was thinking, when we're talking about empathy and living in the time of Richard III as an authentic experience, warts and all, is fascinating because, we could extend empathy beyond historical people. We could even do Kafka's Metamorphosis. We could live as an animal for a day, knowing it's a roller coaster ride, not being ourselves, having none of ourselves in there, only having that authentic experience, lack of consciousness, risk, death, disease, all sorts of things, to then be back in our human brain, saving the experiences that we had. I think that there's a lot of hope there.
So forming, so we've gone beyond just empathising with humans now. We're talking about actually being an entirely different thing, being an animal or something like that. I'd definitely welcome that personally, but I don't know about what
Animal
other
rights people would be very keen on us being able to. Animal rights advocates would be very keen on us being able to extend empathy, in wider and wider concentric circles.
Should that be a test analogous to your politician's test? So before you make a political decision, you have to empathise with your victim. Before you eat an animal, do you have to live a day in the life of whatever?
That's a great idea. I don't know how you'd enforce that. Maybe it would have to be like an opt-in thing. Yeah.
Maybe it could be, you've got the automatic checkouts downstairs at Sainsbury's. Maybe you have to go through like an abattoir experience before you get to buy the packet of bacon.
So go to.
But I think as well, if you think about it in like production ways, finding somebody who would then be the person who you would base that idea on, like I would think it would be difficult to get a full representation of what it would be like to be everybody, because it's probably like the one person, who can we find and who would want to do it and those kind of things. I don't think it would be as exploratory as.
You're saying there might be a limit in how we can produce the source material.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I was just thinking about there's a problem with the politician thing actually, because I think empathy, like apologies, it loses all its meaning and value if it's solicited. I think empathy, there has to be a desire from the person to approach this empathetic experience. Otherwise, it won't have the result that you want. But I think people are motivated to, because it's hugely rewarding for us to have these empathetic experiences.
Any sort of further thoughts on if that would change your experiment?
Yeah, I guess the issue is that you can't enforce empathy. You can't make someone who's a psychopath feel. It's getting very political. Yeah.
I just think this is not really a question about virtual reality, but it's a question more about theatre. I don't know much about performance and acting, but surely that the good actor somehow magnetizes the audience to actually, somehow increase their empathic projection. Do you know what I mean? Through some kind of technique. But I might just be imagining all of this. But are there ways to actually, as an actor, increase the level of empathy that people have towards you?
So, welcome to the table, Raven, if I read your badge correctly. So this is Talkaoke, a talk show where we talk about anything, and we're literally talking about things you could do with virtual reality. One idea was to get politicians to experience the life of someone they're about to bomb or make a decision about before they enact that decision. And that's kind of developed onto, well, what does that say about the power of sort of persuasion in a theatre, in a way, sort of how you can use... would you use virtual reality to enhance acting?
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about just the physical ability to project empathy. Like a very good actor, everyone just feels, they're on the stage and everyone's glued to their actions. Maybe it's just the shape of their face and they're very good looking, but it might be something also to do with how they move their body or how they actually convey their emotions to actually maximise that projection of empathy.
Are you connected to this kind of world at all? Do you have a view on this?
Not really, not into the virtual reality thing myself. I guess I read somewhere a very good comparison that basically anything that happens new in technology before you're 20-something is, before you're 16 or so is natural and has always been there. Before you're 30, it's pretty new, cool, and you can get a career in that. And anything afterwards is unnatural and not supposed to happen. So I guess virtual reality is my thing, which is kind of more towards the unnatural, and I'm slightly scared of it.
Scared of it?
Gets too much science fiction of people living somewhere in the virtual world and not in the real life. So I know that kind of fear comes with every new technology, like, oh dear, there's TV, people are not gonna communicate, but I guess this is my thing that I'm slightly cautious about, personally.
So, do you think there's a rationale for being scared of this, or?
I think there's a sense that this isn't necessarily age specific, but there's a regression. People want to go back to nature a lot of the time, and there's a whole study about people that when they get into old age, they want to go back to where they were born because they want to be in a place that's familiar and comfortable, and like they feel like they're a part of a family, that their life is significant in some way. And I think when we look at technology and the elements that are being brought from various different avenues, that I think people do have a tendency to want to go back to a binary state of humanity rather than something that is beyond reality.
Why do people think this might be, though? What's the driving force for what people wanting to simplify?
Well, I think the fear, of course, is natural for all these kind of new things, especially when they feel so kind of paradigm shifting. But the issue with technology is particularly both exciting but also terrifying. And the internet is the great example, because almost as soon as the internet became ubiquitous, it had been corrupted by various commercial imperatives and fraudulent activities and spying and kind of almost unwilling coercion of data being transferred, and so that those fears are magnified in the virtual world. We were talking about having shared hive mind experiences. Imagine a Russian hacker stealing those emotions, or worse, implanting ideas. The fear is natural, but I mean, time only goes in one direction.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. I mean, I do think that anything that's unknown is, is exciting, and as you were saying, basically repeating your point, it's exciting and scary at the same time, and those things are very much linked because it's the unknown. But, there is probably a dark side. Like, I was listening to radio yesterday, and it was all about how people were being scammed on eBay by a new Nigerian scam where they sent all their stuff to Nigeria because they got fake. It would be so easy to hack people's empathy and get them to either believe in things that they don't want to believe in, or act in a way which is against their interests.
So, thoughts on this? Out of curiosity, as an actress, what's your thought on this? People being coerced into, maybe not pretending, but coerced into empathising through digital means rather than through, as Mikey was saying earlier, through a presence on stage that's very significant.
Yeah, so the thing you were saying about empathy before, about how actors are able to make people empathise, the idea is that the actors empathise with their character, and by experiencing that, the audience get catharsis. Sorry, I can't even remember what the question was. Something.
Well, I mean, sorry.
Well, I guess it's more, is there a technique to doing that? Is it just about the charisma of the actor, or is it like about the story, the context that they're in, or is it all three of those things?
And could this idea inform this idea of digital manipulation?
So there's endless techniques about how an actor empathises with their character, but to actually make the audience connect with you, I guess, is just, we're always taught that you empathise with the character, they'll empathise with you, because everybody wants to be told a story. It's the oldest thing in the world, is telling stories, and that's, I guess, VR is just a new way to do that. It might take my job away, because why would an audience member want to watch other people telling a story when they could be in the story? Or maybe even give a new level to immersive theatre, which would be exciting.
All right, so where should we take this now? I feel like we've almost gone sort of full circle, and we're talking again about manipulation through digital things. I mean, Raven, as you're quite new to the table, I wonder if you've got something that you want to talk about in this loose field. If you're about to escape, do you want to give us some final thoughts? Are you coming back? Good. Could you top me up with hot water, please? Thank you.
Hot water.
Cheers.
Do you want coffee? Anybody else?
Actually, I wouldn't mind just a black coffee.
Should we just shout orders using the PA system? Sorry, yeah. So where should we take this? I mean, is there something that you're kind of curious about since coming here, or?
No idea, really. I'm here for the dog show.
You're here for the what?
Dog show.
The dog show. What's?
Okay, I've got a question. It's completely off the thing.
Yeah,
like,
go for it.
You know, everyone's been talking about genes and our genetic destiny. How can it be that genetically programmed into us to like cats and dogs and pets, and to actually have this empathy for other species? Which, why have we got that? Because we certainly have. We love, like, my niece absolutely loves animals, lions and tigers and whatever. What is that all about? Because it doesn't make sense if we apply the kind of Richard Dawkins style selfish gene. It doesn't really make sense.
In the latest iteration of the Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, he deals with the cats and dogs issues, and that we didn't develop a love for them. We developed them in order to be lovable. So we evolved dogs from wolves. The docile ones came and got food, and they got fed, and they become our pets. So in that sense, we created virtual reality where we made little we made little Tamagotchis for us to entertain us. This is the people who kind of go back to the paleo diet. It's like we have been crafting evolution. We've been using natural selection without even realizing it for a long time. How that extends to lions, I don't know, but it is interesting. Yeah, how there's optimism there that we have great empathy for non-human animals. It doesn't quite extend to kind of viruses or plants yet, but I mean, that'd be a good experiment, being a virus for a day.
It's interesting that you're both kind of edging towards an idea of, it's almost a technological paradigm, isn't it, of us creating some piece of technology that affects us, and we can't then figure out where the origin point was.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's why I think you can only talk for so long about the kind of conceptual, where are the boundaries, because for even longer than we are aware, we've been shaping our reality, we've been changing it to suit our purposes, and perhaps we're not even aware of how we've been doing it. I mean, that's interesting, where we're going. Are we leading tech, or is it leading us, or is that even a meaningful concept?
I think that's an interesting point, and actually maybe that's something we should have a quick think about. Yeah, are we control of where technology is going, or is it in control of us, or something else? What can I get some opinions on what people think there?
I don't quite understand the question.
So we were talking loosely about. So Mikey posed the question of, like, if we are governed by genetics, then why are there sort of external things like cats and dogs that people are so sort of go completely gaga about? And then.
It's not they go gaga, they spend a lot of their resources, like, I don't know if you ever taken your cat or dog to the vets, it's very expensive. Or your hamster, it's a lot more than the actual value of the hamster to get that hamster cured. But yet we've got this emotional input which results in actually we spend like millions, if not billions, on cat and dog food. It just doesn't really make sense from a genetic point of view why we're doing that. But then, is it Jack was saying that it's all about a kind of practice, the practice of love and compassion, that actually that's the reason why we're into it, is a kind of almost like a practice target to have a good relationship.
Yeah.
It's like there's been studies about this, that if you have a cat or dog and you're surrounded by a creature that's very relaxed all the time and just enjoying life, then you feel that as well. There's an impact, and they say that there's a couple of studies that say that if you have a cat, your likelihood of living longer is improved, just because you're of a more kind of relaxed state. So maybe that's something.
Do you think people are doing it because they subconsciously know this and want to have more animals in an attempt to live forever? Kind of almost like the ancient Egyptians? I mean,
I think so. I think the reason why people like having pets around is because they do feel relaxed, and it is a natural feeling to want to care for somebody and be surrounded by something cute.
And what might it say about someone who is not into, or even a bit anti-cat, dog, pet, etc.? That's curiosity.
Well, I don't know. I think the other motivation for us having these pets is, I think it addresses this kind of abundance of need for us to nurture something, especially now.
Nurturing something.
Well, exactly. Especially
our youngest ever Talkaoke participant.
Especially in modern day, where we have so few children.
Oh, hang on. Let's get. May I just get a final thought? off.
Have a final thought.
What's your conclusion from our conversation?
Well, I think that we just need to
Cats and dogs.
just be good for each other, you know, in all of the sector of our life, you know. This is the point.
Thank you very much. So sorry to interrupt, Jack. So
No, not at all. I was just thinking. I think, yeah, the cat and dogs perhaps addresses the issue that we have fewer children. I think a few hundred years ago, a lot of people were having more children that they could deal with, whereas now we have a lot of free time and probably an abundance of a desire to nurture something, and also the basic kind of narcissism of wanting to be in charge and protecting something. I think this goes a long way for us, but also gives us hope that we've got an abundance of empathy that we can place onto something.
But I don't think we do have more free time. I think we have less free time, and I think that's something we were talking about before, is that technology is actually hindering us. It's making us constantly working, not giving us more free time.
I mean, that's something that surely everyone has a,
But I think the thing of people having less time is because I think we're obsessed slightly, maybe, or maybe just me, with like achieving things. And I have to, like my time, yeah, right. That was the danger of me actually talking about myself. But like you have to produce results and good ones as well. For that reason, you cannot afford not, to be disorganized or whatever. That's why you need an app, and you need Google calendars to tell you what time to do things, blah blah blah, because you need to be super efficient. But I think life is just a little bit more kind of going way back to kind of maybe focusing on the experience, which sometimes it seems like there is no outcome at all. It's like you just do things because you just do them. But that's fine. You don't have to produce an outcome. You don't have to produce a result. You're not in competition.
So we've constructed this reality where we have to be busy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting insight into our contemporary life, that everything has to have an outcome, and it's a kind of determinism, be it a genetic determinism that I was just talking about, or a kind of capitalistic determinism that all action must. Well, you were talking about productivity earlier on, and so we somehow feel that every action needs to sort of lead to some kind of growth or consequence, rather than a sort of more experiential approach to life.
So can I just get on? We've got two new faces around the table. Could you just give us your name?
Emily.
Emily, welcome, Emily. And who's this?
That's Maud.
Hello, Maud. So we're just talking loosely about the idea of has the modern world afforded us more or less time, and like reasons for this. So it could be that we actually have less time because we feel we need to be more productive, despite the fact that technology is sort of supposed to be making our lives easier. What are our feelings on this,
I just had a great example of what you both were talking about in terms of results, and I heard this story about Matt Damon when he won the Oscar for writing Good Will Hunting. Is that when he went back to his house, he was like 22 or something at the time, and he thought to himself, thank God I got this now, because I would have spent my whole life trying to achieve this one thing, which actually is meaningless. And he had this kind of sense of relief, and he wished that he could have been able to give that feeling to other people in the industry and say, it's not changing my life in any way, it's just an achievement.
You should have told Leo that, maybe.
Yeah.
And then obviously his output after that was, he didn't obviously worry about things like quality after that whatsoever. He could just relax and do his shtick.
Just have fun. I'll come to you in a sec.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to try to figure out this motivation, this kind of cycle of striving and improving and reimagining what the terms of where we should be striving comes from. It presumably goes way back to trying to accumulate resources in the tribe and making sure that our children are protected from famine or whatever. But yeah, technology, and this plays into the issue of what we were talking about with fear of new ideas and fear of new technology, is that we know, looking at the internet and the recent tech, that we're still in the infancy of figuring out how to master it and to make sure that we're the masters of it and not the other way around. Because I think a lot of us feel like, if email hasn't made us spend less time in the office, it's made us spend more, then we obviously are not winning this, it's not ergonomic, we're not making the technology work for us. So if 20 years into the internet we haven't done that yet, the curve of how we make this work for us is the issue.
Where do you think the fault lies in this? I mean, everyone seems to have different theories on this that I've spoken to about why is it digital technology, which allegedly is going to alleviate things, actually makes it more difficult. Like, why?
I think we're sort of kidding ourselves about what we actually want to do. We actually want to have this very busy, distracted life, and that's why we're doing it. It's not that, we don't necessarily want the things that we say that we want. So, in a way, we have got control, and that we've heard from a lot of people that have just said we have got control, and this is what we're deciding for ourselves.
I think a lot of it is FOMO, fear of missing out, and I think that kind of started dictating our lives. You don't want to miss out. You want to make sure that you're with the right network, and maybe you're doing the correct things. You're achieving top scores all the time because there's no time to dilly-dally, but actually there's plenty of time to dilly-dally, and it's actually fine. Like if you look at people who became successful, even the guy who invented KFC, he didn't do it until later on in his life because he was figuring stuff out, and then he was a colonel or something. But then what he's most famous for is not the dilly-dallying. It's this the invention of quite a successful business model. But that didn't happen instantaneously, and I think we just have to take the pressure of ourselves and just it's okay to.
You see, to me, the guy who invented KFC is not anyone that we should. He may be successful monetarily, but it's KFC. It's not even he might have achieved this later but it's not really a spiritual journey, is it? Inventing KFC and having outlets all around the world.
He might have had a spiritual experience, an awakening.
It's not something that I'm that bothered about. Where either making having thousands of outlets around the world or inventing a formula that goes on and on and on and on.
Jack and Becky.
I was just going to say, we were talking a little bit before about the robots taking our jobs thing, and that the unintended consequence of that may be that we finally get to a place where we evaluate our identities a lot less related to the job we do and the output that we make, and so that may free us up to look at play as valuable activities. It may relax us. Very optimistic today.
This is good.
I think it's the culture, though, because if you compare the UK to America, for example, particularly New York, there's because there aren't very employee rights, that you tend to have people who work incessantly because they're afraid of losing their jobs. And so in this country, we have less of that because you can't, there are certain laws and regulations. And so people have more of a tendency to not be completely worried about keeping their job and working, other than maybe the financial sector. But nonetheless, we're in a position now where we're creating these technological things, like even email. There are facilities that we can create that say, there's this thing now where if you go on holiday, when you come back, it actually deletes all the emails that came through whilst you're on holiday, so you don't have to spend days going through emails that were sent. Because a lot of the time, if you're not there and you haven't dealt with it, it's probably redundant anyway.
That sounds like it might get people into trouble, though.
But that's been created.
Yeah.
And there is that facility, but there's not enough of a culture to say, let's try and make work easier and more efficient in a kind of office environment rather than the other way around.
How is it we make ourselves kind of more efficient then to make better use of our time?
Well, we don't want to do that. That's exactly not what we want to do. We don't want to create more leisure time because that doesn't give us any sense of meaning. What gives a sense of meaning is doing an important job, even though it's completely arbitrary and abstract. I bet everyone around the table has got jobs that are actually not that necessary, but you can't say that. You can't say that. Yeah, exactly. So you're experiencing the free time and leisure that we're all supposedly craving.
Yeah, and in general about the technology and everything, sure, the speed of life is faster and we try to cram more things into our lifespan, but is it really that different? Because 100 years ago, the lifespan was 30-something years on average. By 15 you'd be married and with kids already. If you're not married by 19 or so, then what's wrong with you? Yeah, basically. Nowadays you are supposed to earn the first million by 20-something. So it's just the goals have changed, but back then they were cramming other things into a shorter lifespan. Now we have a longer lifespan and more things we try to fit into it. But is it really that different in general?
I see. So you're sort of saying even though we live longer, we still kind of we're still filling our life with stuff. It's just the time at which we do things is kind
more kind of condensed. I think, which, like you were saying, like we're trying to cram loads more into our life now than maybe before. But maybe there's like just more possibilities of things that can be crammed into. I really like the idea of unnecessary jobs. What are they?
Well, let's find out of you. Let's start with Jack, and then.
But someone was pointing out that the reason that the zombie apocalypse has been this enduring fear in people is that we're also aware of what a service economy we work in and how useless our skills would be if that came about.
But so, out of curiosity, though, useless jobs. You were kind of like sniggering earlier. What do you do for a living?
Work in TV.
In what capacity?
I'm an editor.
Editor. And do you feel that's kind of useful or?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Crucial job for humanity.
Well, no, it's not. Well, that's a big question about what's useful. In a utilitarian, we set up camp on the new planet. It's useless, of course, but within the context of we have the roof over our head and now we're exploring and having imagination, then I think it does have a purpose. Yeah.
Okay. And
I think when you want to broadcast back from Mars, you've only got limited bandwidth, so you can't just give a continual feed. So it's going to be very, very important to actually, find the best bits to actually send back makes sense of what's happening on Mars.
Conserving the resources.
So you'll be a very, very important person on Mars.
But maybe not. I was going to say maybe not the first. What about?
Somebody actually said to me the other day that because I'm a director in commercials, and somebody said to me, everyone on this crew has a skill except you. That's very true, actually.
That's a bit harsh, but okay.
Because anyone the role of a director is to kind of make people, as a team come together in one direction. And everyone actually usually on a crew thinks that they can do your job, but I would never presume I could do anyone else's. So I think I'm probably most redundant in my field.
Like a conductor.
Yeah, exactly.
It leads to some intriguing political thoughts as well. But,
I'm a writer. I get told a lot to get a real job as well. So.
That's funny. That's also what I heard when I said I want to be an actor. But they say that, and then I became a director, and they say that they are failed actors become directors. So I kind of empathise with you in some ways.
Wait, Raven, before you scoot off, will you give us a final thought?
Final thought. Well, I already basically said what I was going to say about the lifespan and everything. So yeah, there's that. But I think the creative jobs are the ones that are actually going to hold out against any technological progress. So it might still become the more real job than any other. So.
Okay, that is a really interesting idea. That puts us on an interesting trajectory.
I personally think that everyone, at least around this table and in the middle of the table, is actually living this life already of doing what they want to do and living a life of leisure anyway. So I think we're actually there. Do you know what I mean? Because we're not actually, having said that, I'm growing some chili plants, but I'm not generally farming or having to produce food or having to sort of fend off attackers or anything like that. So I'm kind of doing what I want to do, and I feel like everyone else around the table is as well. So maybe we've already got there, but we just don't want to admit it.
Okay, let's come to Jack in a second.
It's interesting they say you happen to be growing a chili plant, but you wouldn't class yourself as a organic 12 chili plants, sorry, correction there. But you wouldn't class yourself as an organic farmer. But I think a lot of the people would actually class themselves as that because they need to put a name on something that they do, just kind of validate a little bit more. Because growing a chili plant just because you do is just not good enough. You kind of have to become a thing. That has to become you have to give it a name so it's more proper than, I don't know, or something.
Okay, so for those who've just joined us, welcome. This is Talkaoke, a talk show where we can talk about anything. Conversation has started off about sort of virtual reality and the potential for it to affect us as individuals and affect the economy, politics, geopolitics, in fact, even. But then we've sort of we've subsequently come around to talking about jobs and things like that, and what I guess about how useful to modern society our jobs are. We're all feeling kind of useless but happy because of it in a weird way. So could you give us your names to start with? Let's get around to names.
I'm Nick.
Nick.
I'm Helen.
Helen.
Becca.
Becca.
Jack.
Jack.
Mikey?
Mikey?
Tasman.
Margot.
And my name's Rowan. So, should we carry on this kind of topic of having to obsessively label yourself based on what you do?
I think so. It's just like you adding yet another label to what you do is kind of you are yet another thing. You multitask so much that you're now an organic chili plant farmer or something.
Mikey grows chilies. We've just discovered.
yeah, I'm multitasking as well.
So, what about you guys who've just joined us? Do you feel that people identify through their jobs, like people identify themselves through their jobs, or others identify you based on what you do and not who you are?
Yeah, it's really hard because I do so many different things that when someone asks me what I do, it's really hard to say. So,
what do you generally do when someone asks you that question? What do you do? What do you say?
I mean, well, my main source of income is as 3D artist.
Okay.
So I'll do like various things like visualizations or animations or show stuff. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I just dropped in and I feel a bit.
No, that's all right. We'll ramp it up and you'll get the swing of it. And what about yourself? Do you have a similar feeling that it's a?
It's similar in the sense that I work in creative industries. So although I'm not a 3D designer, you have to sort of stretch. So I don't know. Maybe it's slightly different to people in non-creative industries. I don't know. But for me personally, I have to sort of try and bend over backwards to get whatever work I can and sort of maybe lie a little bit about what I'm qualified to do.
What about when people sort of socially ask people about jobs? Do you feel like, how do you answer that question, and what do you feel sort of when you're put on the spot and told to, like in a very sort of delineated way, state what you are?
It depends.
Sorry. Yeah, come a little bit closer.
It depends what sort of work I'm doing at the time, because sometimes I can be quite like passive aggressive if it's going badly, and so I would like, I'm on the dole or something like that. But yeah, it really depends. But definitely, I think that socially it affects people. Are sort of, they want to know quite quickly what it is you do, and they're going to judge you by it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is a worrying trend that in social situations it tends to be the go-to question. And I don't think really people are mainly concerned with valuing or judging people based on what they work. I think more the issue is that we just don't have a habit of discussing people's nature and people's passions and people's interests and people's ideas as a first priority. It just seems like an easy, lazy way for us to categorise people that doesn't really have any utility. And people don't... You know, someone will ask you in a party, and I'll tell them what I do, and then that doesn't flow onto an interesting conversation that leads in interesting areas. But it's safe, and it doesn't. Yeah, so it's a worrying trend, and I don't like where it's going. But yeah, I mean that may change.
Do you feel that? I'll come to Margaret and say, does anyone feel that this is a peculiarly sort of Anglo-American thing as well? Because I don't normally interject being in the middle, but I feel like when I'm talking with my foreign friends and they ask me the question, "What do you do?" They're kind of asking it because they know that that's how British people introduce to each other. But I don't always find it's the case abroad. Like, it's not the first thing people go to.
In London, I think it's even more.
Specifically London.
If you live in London, you're going to be focusing everything on your work.
That's an interesting point, because I've never noticed that before, but I guess like I'm Polish, and sometimes when I try to have... I think in Poland people just don't do small talk, full stop. So if you do have like a little bit of a conversation, usually it's about something quite immediate, like, oh, this cup is dirty, yeah, as opposed to this part of the cup is clean. Do you know? But this thing about like, okay, so what do you do, just to kind of put things in compartments in your brain like a little easier. I think just kind of, just goal oriented, like, what is it, what am I dealing with here, because my time is limited. I just want to know what I can get out of this conversation, which is very practical and lovely and really useful, but also a little bit soul-crushing, I think. If you, just the fact that we don't have time to explore human nature, and is it possible to explore human nature and everything about that one person that you're speaking to within whatever 30 seconds?
It feels like conversations like poetry because of it.
Oh, like a haiku.
Amongst other types, yes, yeah.
Hey, what do you do? I'm an editor, and the sun shone still. There you go. Yeah. Oh shit, sorry.
So, welcome back. So, we've just talking about, that peculiarly sort of London-centric thing of identifying people by their jobs. And different strategies for dealing with it. And we've learned that in Poland, people don't really go up to each other and say, hey, what do you do? They talk about coffee cups and how dirty they are. And haikus. Apparently in haikus, although that was kind of dubious of that one.
Well, Oscar Wilde said it is very bad form to ask somebody what they do. He's kind of like, if you want to, in terms of the field of wit that I was talking about earlier on, he's kind of quite an important figure. So I don't think it's necessarily something that people generally should be doing.
But then I get he's from an era pre-sort of Nathan Barley obscure creative job descriptions.
I don't think it's a London thing. I think it's a kind of hyper-capitalist thing. I think you'll probably see it in Hong Kong and Singapore as well. And again, I don't think it's a hugely kind of. It's not a pandemic. It's just a habit. I think it's cultural that, and even the question, people don't say, what do you do for work? So they're not explicitly obsessed with money or work. It's a habit. It's a lazy go-to. So you could answer the question, what do you do, by listing your hobbies or listing your flaws. There is space there.
Do you get frustrated by that, though?
Sorry?
Do people get frustrated when you might redirect the question? Good.
Yes, and I don't care. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think it is also like an obsession with categorising people, and I think actually people are coming around to the idea of categorising themselves. Like, I find it very, very strange, because I'm originally from Essex, and then when Talkaoke came out, everyone in my hometown were like, yeah, we're from Essex. Like, it was now a thing, whereas before it wasn't. Like, nobody would really talk about it. And then they would kind of be proud of the weird stereotype that it had created. And even like on social media, people have all their profiles of where they live, what they do, the things they like.
So we've been invaded by aliens. He's been attracted to the spaceship. This is the UFO. What's your future job title, do you reckon?
So yeah, it's frustrating when people feel like they now are categorising themselves. Whereas I think the most interesting people I know are people that kind of change their opinion about things and have more of a kind of flexible attitude towards things.
But do you feel like some people are dubious of people who are hard to pin down? Does anyone else find this kind of...
I think, social media's sort of been around my whole adult life, so I can't really, reflect on before that, in a balanced kind of way, but it seems like they go sort of hand in hand in that respect.
What do you mean?
Just sort of on social media, it seems like you have to sort of define yourself, that's sort of the whole thing around it. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to know if people's attitudes have sort of gone with that, and maybe we do it more because of that. I don't know, I'm speculating.
What's the thoughts on this?
I was just going to say, earlier when you guys were here, we were talking about virtual reality's potential to link people kind of Vulcan mind meld style, to kind of link empathies and link experiences. And if social media has taken us backwards in terms of forcing people into categories or forcing ourselves into categories, communicating in more advanced ways may remove that. But there is a human need, I think, in terms of brain resources to put people into categories. There's a probably good function there, it's just we maybe take it too far. There's a combination of needing to categorise people and also needing to judge people on their utility. Which is
getting back to your zombie apocalypse thing. We meet people and we go, right, who am I going to befriend today? You're an archer, excellent, yes.
But this goes back to the Industrial Revolution. This is about how we saw ourselves, not just leisure, but also play versus utility, all that kind of stuff.
So where should we take it from here? We seem to have kind of plateaued a bit in terms of we all agree that we are not our jobs, but we are judged by our jobs, but we don't judge other people by our jobs. It's the sort of the system, be it capitalism or city life or something. Yeah. So who's
doing the judging? We're judging. I think we're judging ourselves severely.
Is it unconscious then? Yeah.
I think we are severely judging ourselves, and we are being very, very hard on ourselves about what we've achieved, and this. To see the way that our structure of our celebrity culture works is that we can guarantee that unless we're Matt Damon or Leonardo DiCaprio or some other super successful person, we can beat ourselves up about not being the very, very best at what we do. So I do think we judge ourselves quite harshly.
And it comes from this external social pressure of comparing yourself to others? Or...
I don't know where it comes from. Someone else
so
have to fill me
you were
in.
kind of implying, but was there...
I think it comes from, and this has been discussed a lot, the distortion of how successful people are represented. So if you could empathically connect to Matt Damon, you would probably see a much broader picture of his background and what goes on. But the problem is the media gives us an image of what we use to compare ourselves are these vastly beautiful, vastly successful people without any of the warts, and that is very damaging, mostly because we all think we're above being influenced by that, and we're all not.
It's interesting when you kind of see behind the scenes a little bit, and actually on the rare occasion you get to glean a celebrity, what they're really like, and it's all a bit...
A great poet once said, "We hate it when our friends become successful, and if they're northern it makes it even worse." Luckily there's no northern people successful. Oh, you're from up north. Oh, Morrissey.
Morrissey,
Morrissey,
okay,
Morrissey.
yeah. Okay, cool.
Do you want to? Maybe Tasmin wants to have a...
Yeah, let's put Tasmin in the middle. This should be fun. Cool. Yeah, my brain's starting to cauliflower anyway.
Okay, so we're just gonna let's give Rowan a big round of applause for hosting it. Good show, but we're now gonna try. Well, give us a final thought before you go, just to get Tasmin started on this and give her some. This is her first time in the middle, so just give us a final thought before you go. You've been here pretty much all the whole time, so an extra 1 second probably, or a couple of seconds won't hurt. Out you get, Rowan. Just to expedite this. And that might give some pointers to where we go next. Thanks very much, by the way, for giving all your thoughts and extremely insightful and elegant contributions. So stick it in your pocket, yeah. So maybe just get around our names and then get some final thoughts from these people.
Okay.